Good afternoon and welcome to Rubbin Minds. My name is Isabella Adediji. Now, if you're living in Nigeria, you'll agree with me that the cost of living continues to climb each day, from rising food inflation to the removal of fuel subsidy to the floating of the naira. Indeed, it's becoming harder for the average Nigerian, both poor and rich, to really feed and afford the basic amenities in life. To discuss this issue of rising cost of living in Nigeria and how Nigerians are still waiting for that renewed hope, I have with me a public analyst in the person of Opeyemi Oke. Opeyemi, welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Now, I want you to cast your mind back to, say, the beginning of the year, January, February, and now cast your mind back to the previous month and the month just before them. How much have you been spending roughly? Do you feel that you're spending more in those past 2 months? You don't have to give me the exact amount, but maybe by percentage in terms of your transportation, your feeding, your accommodation, going about your day-to-day.
Of course, every Nigerian is spending more. Even the government is spending more right now. So it's been really, really tough for Nigerians, I must say. Looking from my lens and the lens of an average Nigerian out there on the street, it's been tough. The inflationary pressure, the rising cost of food, rising cost of fuel and transportation, and of course our wages, our income, our salaries are relatively the same. So
one side
really
is going up and the other
side
is
yeah, that's what we've had, in the last 2 months. But of course, if we look at, I mean, for the reasons why the government has to do what it has to do, I think that all of us, we have to, pay the price, for now. Hopefully, the government will hold on. I mean, we hold their own side of the bargain, in ensuring that I mean, I love the policy direction we are on right now, but of course, implementing these things to the letters and ensuring that it translates, to the cost of living of an average Nigerian, the masses or the poor of the poorest, is what is most important.
So you say we must pay for it now, but for how long? How long can Nigerians continue to tighten their belts? If you've done it in the month of June, you've done it in July, are we going to do that in August, September? Where is that bright light at the end of this tunnel?
I can't speak for the government, but one thing I can say is that if we look at the policy, like I said, from the policy angle, I think the Tinubu-led administration, I think they're on the right path in terms of, ensuring that fuel subsidy is removed. By privilege, I've worked in both private sector and public sector. So I think I have a bit of understanding of how, some crooks of people, like the president said during his last speech, to Nigeria, that, some elite of the, elite of the elites, right, who are, profiteering, at the expense of our infrastructure, at the expense of the education, at the expense of the inclusive and prosperous Nigeria that that we all
So what happens to the most vulnerable, the people who don't have maybe that emergency fund, that just cannot afford the 3 square meals a day, can't afford to pay their rent? We've heard that the government is considering an 8,000 naira palliative to at least 12 million of the poorest of the poor, but some of the opinion that isn't that some form of subsidy, and why should we be subsidizing for just that amount of people when the effect is felt by all Nigerians?
I totally agree, and I must say that, of course, I think the government has put the implementation of that, on hold for now. That's to say that the government maybe are listening to the people, because saying 12 million out of over 200 million Nigerian population, is not sustainable, is not reasonable. So can we then, instead of giving palliative of 8,000 naira to families, can we make these monies available, for small older farmers, for MSMEs, and pump it into the productive arm of the economy, So by so doing, the effect is much more, because this money is borrowed, it's borrowed. We're going to pay interest on it. So why do we have to, dole it out and give it to people 8,000 with the current, inflation at over 22.79% inflation that we have right now. So you see that that would not even have any meaningful impact on the families that are going to benefit from it. But if this money, if you during the address of the president, the last address, you are hearing of 75 billion in investment into manufacturing, 125 billion into MSME and informal sector. So if we make access to financing available, distribute this money across the states, let this money get to the people that need financing to actually enhance their businesses, I believe that it will have better effect, on the economy of Nigeria, create, more jobs, and is more sustainable and inclusive.
Now, we know that investment in infrastructure takes time. So if you put in money to maybe build roads, to build hospitals, schools, it doesn't happen overnight. But in the interim, what are some short-term gains or short-term decisions, or will I say things to reduce the cost of spending? So, and I'm saying that specifically to the government. Can we look at having governance a little bit cheaper?
Yes.
Because if you say the government is listening, then surely Nigerians are asking, well, if the furniture is okay, why do our lawmakers need to get an allowance for new furniture? And we can't afford transportation, food.
I agree with you. But the truth of the matter is that reducing the cost of governance in Nigeria is not just for political office holders. I think it's high time we start looking at, nobody's talking about the civil service and the need for us to, implement the Oransaye report, to make sure that our institutions are empowered to function maximally at their best. Can we look at reforms in the public sector where, projects are not padded, projects are completed, ministries and department of government. We can see the government is merging MDAs now.
But then when we look at the ministerial list, it's quite long. One would have said if we're going to see that reduction in the cost of governance, shouldn't it start from the top and having maybe a slimmer list?
Having reduced number of government appointments or appointees does not necessarily translate to reduction in cost of governance. But as much as that is important, reducing, the cost of,
But what does it say, the body language of having a slimmer cabinet to the rest of the government, to the state government, to the local government? Surely leadership filters from the top.
So slimmer cabinet would mean that maybe we have, a reduced number of politicians. If you look at, can be nice idea, but what I'm saying is does not
your
necessarily
answer about having mergers, ministries being merged.
Exactly. Currently, I think we have about 541 ministries, development and agencies of government. I don't know, the reduction is still ongoing, but by our Oransaye report, we are supposed to reduce to 161 MDAs. By so doing, I think we'll be able to save about 22 billion, on an annual basis on our overhead. So I believe that beyond just reducing the number of political appointments, we need to actually we need to see through and applaud the merging of these ministries and departments of government. And of course, like I said again, we need to look into, I've been pleased to work both in public sector and private sector. And, if you see the corruption that goes on in our civil service today, you will realize that, politicians are even learner. In some cases, sometimes it's these civil servants that even teach these politicians how to even, go about their, crooks and their whims and caprice to defraud, the nation. That's those that have been alleged to do so. However, I think that if we can, like I said, empower institutions to function maximally and productively, reduce, these budget padding, project padding, and ensure that projects are completed. Like I said, I've asked questions on certain projects in my area, because the moment you are implementing projects in my area, I have a culture of going online. Let me check how much was given for this project. How many kilometers of road should you do? You'll be surprised that some roads, that government awards 17 kilometers. Take for instance, by the time it gets to Ministry for Implementation, go back there, go and measure that road. That road is maybe about 16 kilometers, 15 kilometers. Some civil servants, some ogas at the top somewhere, will find a way to ensure that they reduce reduce it by, 1 kilometer, and the money is shared amongst themselves. So like I
So wait,
said, we need
whose
to.
responsibility is this to keep the civil service in check?
Of
Because you're saying that you do this personally. Are you shifting this responsibility to the office of the citizen?
The office of the citizens has responsibilities. We must not say no to that. However, I believe that's why we elect people to represent us at different, different arms of government. We have them in the parliament. We have them we have some of them appointed as SAs. We have, by the time you look at the job of a legislator, House of Rep, is to perform oversight function, to ensure that projects that are zoned to your, local constituency, you follow up to ensure that it is implemented. There are projects that have been funded by previous administration that were abandoned, that now maybe they will be re-awarded to new contractors. Who is answering those questions? And by the time you ask questions around that, you will realize that it's not necessarily the politician that is even the culprit in this. You will see the hands of one civil servant there. I'm not saying that civil servants are the, are the most corrupt people in the Nigerian system, but I'm saying that, beyond reducing the number of appointees or political office holders, we need to start seeing how we, pay attention to our ministries, departments, and agencies, and ensure that they are empowered to function maximally and productively. You have ghost workers. There are people that are in civil service today. They are no longer in the country, and yet they are earning salaries. There are coppers. I mean, this corruption they were talking about.
Do you agree that the cost of governance today
is high?
Is high.
It's it's obvious to even the blind, and of course clear to everyone that the cost of governance in Nigeria today is high, and that is why I'm appealing to our senators. Of course, they are elected to represent the interest of the people. So we must this is a very urgent, and the state of the economy in Nigeria it requires that how do I put it? It requires urgent intervention. So we should not be talking about furnitures or whatever it is that we want to do. Yes, your work environment is to be made as comfortable as possible, but can we delay this gratification, and this 75 billion can be pumped into SMEs, youth empowerment, at the grassroots level? I'm a grassroots man. I advocate for inclusive economic development, even at the local levels. You'll be surprised at what a trader can do with 50,000 naira in my hometown in Ilanrogo in Osun State. You'll be surprised. You'll be amazed at what you can do with 50,000 naira. And if that money trickles down to, and these are people that cannot afford, that cannot access loan with banks. Lenders they can't give them money. So our MSME and informal sector needs attention, and by so doing, we can drive productivity at the local level.
I'll take you back to the point you made about investing into SMEs and having those micro loans available. Now, if you look at the past administration under President Muhammadu Buhari, the NSIPs address that, whether you're talking about the trader money, market money, farmer money. But how successful were these, and how much impact did they make that these things should be considered to be carried on in terms of providing the much needed capital to these institutions?
So that brings me back to what I said again about the civil service and our ministry's government agency. By privilege, during the Buhari-led administration, I was the Director General of the Chamber of Commerce. So I was hands-on in the implementation of some of these projects. And you'd realize that as successful, as brilliant as that idea would have been, if you observe during the first term of Buhari-led administration, when the office of Vice President oversaw the implementation of that project, we recorded success. But during the second time it was taken to the ministry, what happened? What happened with it? Then we recorded crazy failure. Or permit my language, and that was by ministry. All right. When it was implemented by the office of the vice president, we would have said, "Oh, politicians are thieves." It was successful. But during the second time, when the responsibility was shielded to the ministry, what happened? Corruption happened. Now, it would have been a successful project because truth of the matter is this money was made available. It was not audio money. I have members of my Chamber of Commerce that accessed the facility. They are paying back gradually right now. And that's a fantastic project. Be able to access 10 million naira at a single digit.
So the administration is
is just as important as the policy.
Okay.
So and look at this. The woman that implemented that project is not answering questions now. So
that system of accountability, even beyond an administration's tenure. But I need to still get you back to the realities of living in Nigeria today. the average person that does not have that money saved for the rainy day, what should they be expecting? What kind of cushion can they expect in the short term while we're waiting for the economy to be stimulated? What should the government be doing to address this? Because the removal of subsidy affects both rich and poor. It affects the cost of living. It affects the cost of production. And when people are using more money to produce things, then people have less purchasing power. And then you begin to see the economy to stagnate.
Right. Of course, it has become very pertinent that in Nigeria today, you cannot sit down with one source of income and expect that you'll be fine. So this is the time for people to leverage their resourcefulness and see what you can. I mean, myself, I've had to diversify and do other things, right? As much as, yes, we expect the government to put right infrastructure in place for us to thrive, we also all serve a responsibility to make sure that we survive, like the Tinubu-led administration has said, within the next 9 months, they're pumping money into the informal and formal sector, and of course, manufacturing is also, part of the 75 billion for 75, companies that will create jobs.
Are you confident that this will affect the rising cost of living, inflation? Can we expect to see these numbers come down?
The inflation, of course, it's not like I said. The Tinubu-led administration is just about 60 days old in administration. Like I tell to my friends, is that as much as we have a lot of pessimists in town, as much as we have a lot of narratives online, I think it's we are first Nigerian before we are partisan politician, whatever it is that we are. Whoever is the president of Nigeria now, our dream is for Nigeria to be better. So let's stay optimistic that the government knows what it is doing. Let's trust the policy, direction of the government. Advise when necessary. Hold government accountable. I'm an advocate of let's hold government accountable. But 60 days is too short for us to start really saying that they will fail, that they are set out to fail. Let's stay optimistic, that our country is going to be better. But of course, in our optimism, I'm also telling the government that government needs to ensure that they don't take the resilience and the resilience of Nigerians for granted. So I am appealing to our president and everyone that has been, appointed to champion one thing or the other to ensure that, we stick to the direction that can cushion the effect of this inflationary pressure that has translated into really hardship, for the people. Whilst, business owners, as much as, of course, the pressure is also mounting on them. So asking them to increase wages right now might not. I'm talking about the private sector. I see President Tinubu is saying that, of course, the wages and the living wage is going to increase. That has to be implemented at the earliest possible time. So if living wage is increased and money or access to finance is made easy for MSME and informal sector, and of course there is revolution in our agriculture and we can be more productive at the local level. So if you are producing the things that we depend on dollars, to import into the country, our demand for dollar on our highly dollarized economy becomes a bit, softened, and it becomes a win-win both for the government and for the people.
The last thing you said or earlier on was that we need to start seeing the leaders, the elected officials, reduce their expenses to really show that they understand the plight of Nigerians. Thank you very much, Okpeyemi, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
We'll go on a quick break now. Join us again. Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. We're now joined by our celebrity Nollywood actress in the person of Ruby Orjiakor, who will be joining us via Zoom. Hello, Ruby. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Have you on Rubbin Minds. So, Ruby, tell me, how was it climbing so fast to the top of the ladder in Igbo, or should we say the Eastern Nollywood, the Igbo side of Nollywood?
How was the what?
How was it climbing so fast to the top in Igbo Nollywood, or the Eastern side of Nollywood? Like, how was your rise to the top? What were the things that you did to be able to get to where you are in terms of your acting in Igbo Nollywood? Ruby, do we still have you?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, actually, it wasn't really fast, like you said. It took processes, and not like the movies were just coming like that. It took a lot of dedication. God, I was focused. That was what brought me to where I am today.
That because a lot of people, they just see when you've blown, and they don't realize just how much hard work has gone on behind the scenes. But there's a lot of allegations in Nollywood that for you to rise very quickly to the top and to make it, you have to, engage in sexual activities with producers, directors. How true is that, and have you ever been faced with such propositions?
Of course, I have been faced with so many of those, but it's not my thing. Do you understand? I just believe that in life is about choice. It's about what you want. So when they come with such proposal, I always turn it down. So I hit my chest and I can tell you publicly that nobody will come out, no director, producer, or whosoever will come out and say, I have slept with Ruby and gave her a role, or I slept with her to give her this role. Because I was never desperate. That's just the truth. When I was coming up, I was never desperate. So things like that actually happens to people that are desperate. Yes, they want to rise overnight. They want to be superstars overnight. They want to get to the top because this person has made it. They just want to. So once you tell them, this is how it will be, give and take, they will just accept. But in my case, it wasn't like that. My case, it was just God. If you don't want to give me the role, you can go with it because I believe in my craft. I believe, yeah, of course.
And how has
Do you
it been for
understand?
you turning down those advances? Do you feel that you would have risen quicker to the top? And for the young people coming behind you, what advice do you have for them? What can they do to ensure they don't fall prey to, some of these advances?
The truth is, whether you sleep with these people or not, if God says you will not get there in the time you feel you will get there, you will not. Everything is just God. Because if maybe I had slept with those people, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today. Do you understand? Or maybe I might have passed this level, or I might be below the level I am. So I believe everything is just God. It's not even about sleeping with people. So sleeping with people is never the best. It's never the best route to take. So what my advice to the upcomers, please, you sleeping with director, producer will not make you a superstar overnight. You might sleep with that person, and at the end, you end up being nowhere. There are lots of people that have come like that and they've all gone. Today we can't even find them. A lot of people that came, sleeping with different directors, producers. Today I can't even find them. They've all fallen out. They've all gone out because when they sleep with you, they tell the next person that wants to give you a job, before you give them this role, sleep with them. I don't collect my own share. Before you know, you've ended up sleeping with almost all the producers and directors in Hollywood. And at the end, you will not have face to face them. You won't have the mouth to talk in public. By so doing, you become ashamed of yourself, and before you know it, the person has left Nollywood. So we have so many girls like that have fallen apart, that would have gone far.
Ruby,
Yeah.
do you have any names in particular of people that have fallen by the wayside as a result of this? And do you have any role models that you look up to?
Oh my word! The truth is, I can't start mentioning names of people that came through that process and fallen apart or something like that. I can't start mentioning their names. But of course, I have role model. In fact, I have number one role model in this Nollywood. The truth is, Toyi Abraham. I don't know, our world best, Toyi Abraham. She's my role model. My role model. That's Toyi Abraham. I always look up to her.
A lot of times people say women don't support women, but it's interesting that your role model is a woman. What has Toyin Abraham done in terms of uplifting you in the Nollywood scene, and why do you speak so highly of her?
The truth is, she doesn't even know before now, but I have loved her from way back. I have loved Toyin Abraham. She doesn't know about this. It was recently we started following each other on Instagram, but currently I'm working on her project. There's this international project. In fact, this is my First cinema movie, the first time this Ruby Orjiakor will be appearing on Netflix, cinema, or whatever, because she's working on an international project. And she called me, even when people were saying, why Ruby now? Why do you want to use Ruby and all that? I beg, use, let's use more classy babes, more higher babes, people that, that have doings and all that. She said, no, I want this girl. And I believe she has her reasons why she wanted me in the project. And by God's grace, I'm in the project, so I'm happy.
It's good to see that good relationship between two women. But what is your relationship with Destiny Etiko, and why are fans always pitching you against each other?
Oh my word, we don't have issues. Destiny and I don't have issues, honestly. We're good friends. Yeah, we are good friends. We're sisters. Okay, I believe why people were talking about us was because of the prank we did the other time. It was actually a prank. It wasn't real. We're not having issues. We're not fighting. We're not quarreling. We are fine. We're good. Like, seriously. No competition. We're not competing with each other. We're fine.
Okay, so what next should we expect from you beyond this international role? Do you see yourself doing more movies in the eastern part of Nigeria? Or do you see yourself breaking into mainstream Nollywood? What should we expect next from Ruby Orjiakor?
Expect something higher. Like, from here, I'm breaking boundaries. From here, I'm entering Hollywood direct. Like, after this movie, I am going higher. I'm going above this level. Forward ever, backward never.
Okay. I think the final question will be, is Nollywood very lucrative? Because we see a lot of actresses maybe act 2 or 3 movies, and the next thing is we see a mansion, they're posting on Instagram. Does it really pay as much?
Anyway, I can't really, I can't speak for them. There are different people with their own way of making money. Yeah. But like this my role model, Tony Abraham, she does good movies, standard movies, and it's really, really paying her. So if it's somebody like her now, you tell me she did 3 movies and she bought a house and all that, I'll tell you, yeah, it's true, it's possible, because she did something great. And of course, it went far. She made her money, she made gain and all that, so she'll be able to afford it. But to some other persons, I don't understand, though. Me, I can't speak what I don't know.
All right. Thank you very much, Ruby Orjiakor, and we wish you all the best with your production and your breakout into the international scene. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Thanks for having me. I love you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the discussion on palliatives, move on to the discussion on the rising cost of living being in Nigeria. And I have with me in the studio another public affairs analyst in the person of Ahmed Agbabiaka. Welcome to Rubbin Minds.
Thank you for having me.
So, Ahmed, I'm going to pose the question I posed to our earlier guest is, I want you to cast your mind back to the first few months of the year, say January and February, and just think about how much you spent on food, transportation, basic amenities, and then now cast your mind back to the past 2 months, so June and July. Can you see any differences, any discrepancies? What has changed for you, if anything at all?
Well, a lot has changed for every Nigerian in terms of our expenditure and purchasing power. And it is not anything surprising, because that period you made mention of is not just the beginning of a year, it was the period of intense politicking and the period where you have the most spending by government, by politicians, by a whole lot of people to conduct election. So we expect that there will be a lot of liquid flow in the economy, and that afterwards there is the natural implication that there's going to be inflation, there's going to be less money, more money in the economy for less products, less commodities to purchase and all that. So it's nothing surprising, it's nothing unusual if you want to look at it broadly. But we are in a period where there's a whole lot of effects on the economy globally. Every nation in the world is experiencing one form of economic downturn or financial downturn whatsoever, in one way or another, even the developed countries. So it's nothing unique or specific to Nigeria. So it's just something that is global, and that the government now, that will now take government, the government of the day, to fix. And the concerns of Nigeria will now be, okay, what is the government doing to ensure that these things are put in place or things are put right for them to be able to carry on with their lives?
So from that answer, your expenditure has gone up as a result of a global effect on, say, the economy.
Yes.
Recessions are happening. Yes. There's less money in the economy.
Yes.
But now let's take this conversation home. Let's bring it to Nigeria. We have a new government that has come with the tagline, renewed hope. And there's been a lot of expectation that things will get better. Things will get better for everyone. And yet it seems like the poor are struggling to breathe because the price of living is really choking people.
Yes.
Has that been your experience? And what are you expecting from the government to address this?
Well, I think a lot has happened. I just want to summarize. If there is a fact on ground that we had a regime, a subsidy regime in this country, where the elites, a little numbers of the early population of the country were subsidized. You know, they were making a whole lot of money from the poor, and there is a seemingly disposition that, well, things are going on fine. But deep down, a whole lot was happening. The government before now was borrowing 400 billion naira monthly to subsidize petroleum. This petroleum we learned later, we now came to learn that they were being moved after getting the subsidy money to neighboring countries. That is not good for the country. It doesn't mean that things are going on fine. So I think, what is the government now doing to cushion the effects? Those whose, what, like the president said, feeding bottle have been stopped or blocked, will want to fight back. But in doing so, the government should have expected this, and I feel they have expected, and there is a need for them to prepare to counter whatever measures those people are bringing. So, in effect, the subsidy is gone, price of oil is going up in accordance with the international market, what is obtainable in the international market as regards the price of crude. So it is not just about Nigeria. It is about saving for the future. During the election, there was a lot of talk about our children.
It's not just about Nigeria and saving for the future, but some will argue that it's a lot.
Yes.
In a very short time. So
yes.
there was a planned increase
yes.
in the tariff for electricity, which
yes.
has been put on pause.
Yes.
There was also the increase of the price of petroleum,
yes.
that's fuel.
Yes.
Then you also have the floating of the naira.
Yes.
And all these things have ripple effects. So
yes.
what it means is that if I'm spending, say, 50,000 naira to go about my daily activities
yes.
as an entrepreneur and to also fuel my car,
yes.
or to use public transport, I might end up spending 100,000 naira.
Yes.
So because the naira has been floated, so and
yes.
we're very dependent on import. So do you agree that all these things should have happened in quick succession, or should they have been, maybe they've taken their time to introduce some of these things?
Okay, there are some things that are just basic. There are some things that have to go with immediate effect, and that is the subsidy and the floating of the naira. Subsidy regime have to go, and the floating of the naira just have to happen. Why did I say this? The government did something very important and very impactful. While this was going on, there were agencies that the government that were not even set up, or that were not constituted by the government, that this government met. We can say it was an APC government taken over by another APC government. But before the government came in, there was a planned, in fact, ongoing increment in school fees in tertiary institutions. There was the plan by NERC, or the electricity distributors or something, companies, to increase electricity tariff. When this government came in, these very important things, subsidy removal and the floating of the naira, have to happen. So
But
they
what
happen.
happens
No,
to
but
the
it
people?
happened.
What happens to the people who don't understand the benefits for the next 5
That is
years?
why,
What
yes.
happens to the people who can't afford to go to their offices? What happens to the people who now can't afford to take their children to school 5 days a week?
Yes.
What happens to them?
Yes, it is very important for us to also note that in the course of doing this, we had the school fees increment, that the planned school fees increment, or even ongoing school fee increment that predates this administration. Just a couple of days ago, the president said all the universities should put a hold on the increment in the school fees. There was also the issue of farmers not being able to go to their markets or go to their farms and all that. A whole lot happened recently, and that security has to be beefed up. The president laid down some guidelines about what he intends to do. The president came out and said he wants to speak in the plain language that the people understand. Now, what do we need to do? This has gone. There's a hold on removal of tariff, on the increase in electricity tariff. That is excellent. There's a directive to put on hold the increment in school fees. That is excellent. Now, in the agri sector, immediate release of a whole lot of fertilizers to ensure that the farmers get to have access to implements, to go to their farms. And, these things are very important. If we check, there is a whole lot of noise that has been going on. The real impact has been acknowledged by the president. When people say, let the poor breathe, it was his slogan, it was his mantra that the poor has to breathe, and there is a renewed hope. In flowing with that, some things are just very hard. Some hard choices have to be made.
And those hard choices have
the
been
removal.
made?
These are these two important things. The removal of the subsidy. It has an overbearing or overreaching effect on the people. The president has acknowledged that. This is a fresh government, a new government, just 2 months or so in the line. So what next does the government need to do is to ensure that the agri sector and the palliative that needs to be put in place. This government is responsive.
Sorry, so we'll have to bring the conversation to an end there, but thank you for your contributions on Rubbin Minds. We'll go for a quick break. Do join us again. Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. Now, I'm joined by a lawyer in the person of Tope Salami. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So now we know about cancel culture. We know about, very quickly, we go onto these social media platforms to call people out. Where do we draw that line between, say, calling out, between landing a lawsuit, or between ending up in jail? Because we've seen people who would take what somebody has said online and ensure that by some means they end up in jail for saying something online. Where do we see that line? Because it seems like the lines are blurred these days.
Yeah, so we need to understand that everybody is human and we have blood running. And our level of perseverance is also very objective or subjective, as the case may be. So the line is actually drawn at a point where something appears offensive or where something will reduce the personality or the person in the eye of a reasonable man in the streets. Once it becomes offensive, then the line has been crossed. And we also need to know that because we've got blood running in our veins, words get to people differently. For anything offensive, anything that is not legal, or anything you are not, any action taken without, resting on every form of legitimacy, the line would have been crossed at this level.
Who gets to determine what is offensive? What you might consider offensive might be different from what I consider offensive. Do we have any document, anything that we can refer to say this is what is really offensive and this isn't offensive, or this constitutes something that could end up in the courts?
Okay, so earlier I had said something about the reasonable man test. The reasonable man test would allow the society to know that, okay, if I were to be in these shoes, how would I have felt? These particular words, spoken or written, can these words lower my goodwill? And when I say goodwill, my goodwill as a person, my goodwill as a business person, and my goodwill, even as a Nigerian.
Okay, so if you're exercising your right to freedom of speech, right? You can speak, and you're calling truth to power. You're holding people accountable. That might be seen as offensive, but really, you're just stating things as they are. What does the law have in place to protect such people who have to do that as part of their work? They could be journalists, for example, who are calling truth to power. How are they protected?
Of course. So when you call truth to power, we need to know that regardless of whatever you say, regardless of whatever you write, if it is the truth, if it is reflecting the true situation of how things are, it is very easy to prove. At that particular point in time, the law would do what? Provide a good shed for you. Also, the National Orientation Agency, I mean, we keep saying it, these, amongst other things, should actually be, their duties. You should bridge the gap between citizens and government. You should take policies made by the government to the citizens. You should take the grouses of the citizens back to the government. Trust me, if that line or if that entity that bridges the gap between these two society personalities, citizens and government, I mean, would have a sane cyber society. Also, the Cyber Act,
Sorry, I want to come in there.
Act,
I want to come in there because as a lawyer, I'm sure you've come across some of these cases where somebody, because of the influence they have, they're just able to wield so much influence and power, and then you step on their toes, and the next thing is you're being, bundled away to jail. Does the law protect that person who may have just gotten carried away, maybe in putting a tweet out or a thread out, and they didn't mean it in that way, but the person at the receiving end feels they're a big man or a big woman, and they're going to show them and ensure that they teach them a lesson? Does the law really protect such people?
Well, the law protects such people in as much as what you are saying or what you are doing is the truth. Anything outside the truth, even in journalism, I mean, it is just right, it is natural for journalists to carry out their investigation 100%, because you really cannot say one word can spoil an entire generation. I mean, the Cyber Crime Act of 2015 has also shed, more light into this. You cannot be behind the scene. You cannot be with your key parts and you're actually typing something that is extraordinarily offensive to someone. And we need to know one thing. So far you're a businessman, so far you're an entrepreneur, so far you are anybody. One thing is very important, and that is the goodwill, the business goodwill. And so the business goodwill is like a white cloth. Just sprinkle a little percentage of palm oil on it. It makes the white clothes very useless. Even if you use the best soap, it might not go off. So words get to people differently, and people now assimilate, these words differently. And some people, if care is not taken, they may never write again.
Yes, and that takes the conversation to the issue of cyberbullying, because these days we have people that maybe can't face other people face to face, but they go behind their keypads and they start saying all sorts of things. What can be done to really curtail this? Like, do these laws that you were talking about address these issues for people who end up as victims of cyberbullying?
No, definitely. Section 24 to Section 27 of the Cyber Crimes Act has made, provision for this, for cyberbullying, for cyber stalking, and of course, for people who also helped in carrying out, these crimes. So the law is there. It is left for us to let people know that these laws are there. And of course, then people would say, oh, regulate this, regulate that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the easiest word, the easiest way will be censorship. Now, the government and the owners of this platform, they need to work hand in hand to say, okay, let us censor X, Y, Z. Just like some words are censored in videos that are probably going to be played on the national TV.
So I want to ask you, were you in support of the Twitter shutdown during the past administration, or even in, say, neighboring countries like, say, Senegal, where sometimes the internet goes completely because they're trying to manage, what is being said, they're censoring the speech of people when you look at it for what it really is.
So for me, I was not in support of, the shutdown of Twitter. And I mean, looking at it from various angles. One, Twitter was shut down. It's affected people's businesses because that was, some people's offices. Now, you shutting it down would definitely infringe on certain constitutional rights. I always believe shutting something down or permanently killing that thing is never the best solution to whatever it is that you think you are doing. But then there are strategic ways that you censor things. We've got countries like Asian countries. Don't let me mention Asian countries. It's not as if they don't have internet. It's not as if they are not making use of social media, but there are limitations. There are rules in place. And remember, social media, whether we like it or not, paints the picture of what is going on in your business, what is going on in the country, depending on what you put out. So we need to protect our society regardless.
So where does having a diverse opinion now turn into hate speech, and how does that affect, our basic right to freedom of speech?
Yeah, so even our basic right to freedom of speech still has limitation, whether we like it or not. Now, if you are typing something or if you are putting something out and it is so offensive to the level that by the time you even swap roles or by the time you swap position, you would understand that if these things were to be done to you, you would have acted in X, Y, Z
So by putting yourself in the other person's shoes,
once it is offensive,
then you also begin to see how offensive it can be read as. Thank you very much, Tope Salami, for your contributions on Rubbin Minds.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
And this is where we'll be closing the show today. My name is Isabella Adediji. Join us again next week for another episode of Rubbin Minds. Good afternoon.